Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video and welcome to a Q&A or Ask Me Anything that I'm filming now in November because I have run out of ideas. I thought that I could go through the YouTube ones first. So these are in no particular order and I'm going to answer book questions, other type media questions, writing questions all together. And I haven't prepared an answer for these ones, so this video will probably be a lot to edit. And the first question is writing advice. So the person asked, do you have advice on deciding where to set my story in the huge world I've created? It could potentially happen anywhere, so I have no idea where to set it. Also, do you ever feel like once you've done writing a scene, it didn't turn out the way it was in your head? If so, what do you usually do? Okay, so the first question. The best answer for that question is to look on your character, like who is telling this story? Who is the person or entity that we're following in the story and what is important to them? So I turn to the backstory of my characters, like how did they grow up? Did they have family? And then you build from your characters. So instead of just picking a place anywhere random in your world, you should pick the place that is important to the character and that character's, development and that character arc. Maybe you have a couple of plot points already where you know like where that's gonna be set in your story, and then my advice is to work backwards like to your character. And for my first story that I ever finished, there was a girl that lived in a village inside a mountain or inside an old volcano. And so before I decided on where the book should start, I looked to that character and was like, she has been living secluded her whole life, and it was about her meeting this ancient witch, Norse inspired, because I love that kind of stuff. It's gonna set her on a path to like go outside the mountain that she has known her whole life and step outside of her comfort zone. When I knew that that was gonna be like her fear and misbelief and everything was gonna be set around how she has grown up, then I knew that I would start my book with her going into the mountain because she is hunting outside and going into the mountain and the safe feeling that she gets. And so that was my setting for where the book started and like the starting point. And she then goes outside of the mountain later on in the story. I don't know if this helped you. I'm sorry. And the second part of your question was, do you ever feel like once you're done writing a scene, it didn't turn out the way it was in your head? Yes, all the time. If so, what do you usually do? And those kind of scenes that I don't feel like vibe with what I have in mind is usually the type of scenes where two characters are talking. So in my head, they are talking and they are being portrayed in a different way than I have written it. So the vibe of the scene is different, the dialogue hits different. It doesn't have that spark between the characters. For example, I write fantasy romance, so a lot of my scenes is between these two characters that I want to build a romantic connection between. So the scenes that I end up like not being happy with is often those scenes. For example, when I wrote the sequel to Gods of Rot and Ruin, I had envisioned the male main character to be a certain way in my head. And then when I wrote him, he was all soft, but in my head he was kind of the morally grey, douchey kind of love interest. So when I wrote him as a softie with anxiety and him not being able to speak his mind, he was so different from the person that I had envisioned. So I went back, like I actually did this, I went back through the chapters and I looked at where I could change the dialogue and the way of his thinking to look more like what I had envisioned. So I guess that's my tip. Go back to what your purpose is with the book or the story or the character or the scene. Like, what do you want to say with a scene or portray with a scene or character? Go back to the beginning and then try to plant those little seeds where you might have missed to or changed a couple of dialogues. Word choice can oftentimes change a scene a lot. So when I'm stuck on a scene, changing the word use and phrases can oftentimes help like the scene evolve. So that's my tip. The next question is, or rather a statement, I guess. I would love to hear about your writing journey, how you started out as a writer, your favorite childhood books, etc. So I could go on I can do a whole video about this. Childhood books is different, but favorite books that has made me a writer, I have a video all about that actually, and I can link that in one of these corners and also in the description below if you want a more thorough video on a lot of books that has, made me become a writer and made me want to write my own stuff. But childhood childhood books, I have always been obsessed with Norse mythology, so I guess childhood stories and Swedish folklore tales about trolls, gnomes, creatures in the forest, and fairies. I loved reading about fairies, and there is a series, I don't know what it's called, but there is one series that I read as a kid that has, like, each book was about a different fairy, and it's different fairies for different colors and rainbows and such. I don't have it on my shelf right now, so I can't really tell you. So that is my best answer for that. But how I started out as a writer, I guess I have always loved writing stuff in school. Fictional things and also assignments. So like most other writers, I started out very young when I was at school and we got the assignment to do a short story or something. It has helped that I have read a lot, and so I think a lot of you may see yourself in my writing journey, because I feel like a lot of us are the same in that way, that we start very young and then through school. But that's my story. And the next person actually asked 3 questions. And the first one is, what is your Hogwarts house? And my Hogwarts house is Hufflepuff. I have taken the quiz so many times, you know, the official Hogwarts quiz. I always get Hufflepuff, and my mom is a Hufflepuff, but I have secretly always wanted to be either Ravenclaw or Slytherin. But I have come to terms with that I may just be a Hufflepuff, and I can live with that. You know, Hufflepuffs are underestimated, I feel like sometimes. I'm proud to be a Hufflepuff. What are your favorite and least favorite tropes in fantasy or other genres? This is a hard question, and I feel like I should have come up with an answer before sitting down to film this video. I feel like it's a given nowadays to say enemies to lovers, but I do love an enemies to lovers trope, both in fantasy, sci-fi, or romance. I don't know what the trope is called, but in romance, and in all romance that I have read recently and like, the 2 characters find themselves in a situation where they have to depend on each other even though they don't want to. It's not necessarily enemies to lovers, but more like, for example, marriage of convenience, or have to work together on something, a work project, because both gain something out of it, or they have to be in a contest together even though they don't really like each other, that kind of stuff, because that puts 2 people that don't really match together, and then they form a bond, and it turns out they actually do really match. So that's my favorites. And fantasy, I do love a magical school setting in fantasy. I eat that up so bad. Nevernight by J. Kristoff. I know we don't like to support J. Kristoff, but when I read Nevernight a couple of years ago, I fell in love with the school setting, and I just love that kind of trope. Hogwarts, yes. Thank you very much. Secret society things, Legendborn for example, I haven't read that book, but I do really want to because it has the secret society thing. 9th house, secret society, or magical schools. Okay, so least favorite tropes. I'm looking at my shelf because I'm trying to figure out if one of the books here has my least favorite trope. No? I have been sitting here for 5 minutes trying to figure something out, but I can't. So you just get a lot of my favorite tropes instead, and none of my least favorites. And then what is your least favorite book that you have ever read? I need to check on my Goodreads for this one. I don't even know if I have given a book 1 star before. So I haven't given a book 1 star before. A couple of books that I gave 2 stars, and one of them I definitely did not like, and that is The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This book was just not it for me. I feel like the fat shaming or fat phobic comments in the book weren't really addressed well, because the adult male characters, the side characters, were commenting on our female main character, on her body and how she is supposed to look and everything. They didn't think she was beautiful with hair short, and you know, the, I think, love interest in the later books, he said that she was like ugly with short hair and she should have long hair. Of course, you can argue that that is a preference, like people with long hair or short hair. It didn't sit right with me, and I felt like, why isn't she doing something about it? And maybe, like I said, maybe it's something that is gonna be addressed in later books, and things that she's gonna like give back to the people that said so to her, but I won't stick around to see that. So that will have to be my answer for your question. And then the last questions from YouTube is, have you ever used a site/app called Novelpad? I have not, but if one of you have used it, one of you watchers, you can comment about it and what your experience was with it down in the comments below, so that the person that asked this question may get some help and like opinions on it. And then question 2, what app is friendly for authors to use to have save their writing work on a tablet? So I don't have an app, but my tip is to use the cloud. So for example, I use Google Drive for a lot of things, and Google Drive you can have on your iPad, you can have it on your phone, so you can access your documents through the cloud and through your email account, your Google account, or YouTube account, you can access your documents and pictures from whatever platform you're on. So, and it's all connected, so you can write something on your phone and it will show up on your iPad. And so I think cloud is the best way, because if you just download it as a PDF, or if you have an app and writing things in the app, those things can get deleted, or like if something happens with the app or your tablet. But if you use the cloud or Google Drive, for example, then it will be saved. And the only thing that you have to keep track of is your Google account. Set it up so that you have every safety ability like checked, and then remember your email account. And that's my best answer, because I don't use my iPad for writing, but when I was at school I would go and look through my Google Drive to access papers and such that I had written on my laptop when I was at home and just wanted to read through something or write something there in the notes. I could easily do that through Google Drive. And then question 3, will you be able to make NaNoWriMo vlogs each day? And I talk about this more thoroughly in my plan with me for November, and I can link that in this corner. I will not do NaNoWriMo this year, and you have probably already figured out that I will not be doing NaNoWriMo vlogs every day, because even though I didn't do NaNoWriMo last year and I did win NaNoWriMo and I wrote a novel, I was a bit burnt out at the end, and I tried to write something new and edit Cultural Ruin in December. That just didn't work out for me, and so this year I'm taking a break. Maybe there will be an editing vlog in late November, but that depends on if I get the book back, my debut novel back, from the editor. So thank you so much for asking me those questions here on YouTube, and if you didn't see that like community post that I posted and wasn't able to comment something, you can always comment in the comments section below and I can answer them in the comments of this video, or save them for later Q&A maybe, I don't know. Now we go to Instagram, and I'm gonna start with a question that kind of goes back to the first question that I answered from YouTube, and that's, how do you come up with your story ideas, and especially with an idea for the first chapter? So I don't typically sit down with the intention to come up with a story idea, because oftentimes I have had little sprinklings of ideas, maybe a scene there, maybe a character there, or a setting, like this would be cool, or this plot idea would be cool. But when I get an idea, I write it down, because you never know when that idea would come in handy, or if it would fit with another idea of yours, and you can kind of merge them together to build maybe a book with a couple of subplots, or a better book, I guess. So that's how I come up with ideas, like what sounds cool and what do I want to say with the story. And I actually have a video on how to outline, and I think I talk about the first step idea process in that video, and I can link that in one of these corners and also in the description below. And so to your next part of the question was, and especially with an idea for the first chapter. So I don't know why, but every story that I have done, I have quite easily come up with an idea for the first chapter. And I don't really know how. That's the main issue of me answering this question. I don't know how I come up with the first chapter idea. Kind of in the same vein as the first answer I gave to the first question in this video. It all has to do with the character and the story that I want to tell. So considering your character and the character arc, you have to figure out like where to start the story when it comes to the character arc. Like, who is your character at the beginning of the story, and what they want, what they fear, and everything. And then I also think about the outline, because the first thing that you want to do in a story is the hook, I think. And the hook is basically where you want to entice your reader and want to like give them something, a bait, so that they will hook onto that, and that will keep them reading up until maybe the inciting incident, for example. So give them a scene that throws them into the narrative, like throws them into the person's life that we're going to follow, or the situation that is in the beginning of your book. Like, don't go long paragraphs and talk about the weather or someone waking up, for example. That is a cliche that I think a lot of people just should stay long away from. Throw them into a situation that shows your characters their fears, what they want, and what they need, and what is standing in their way from getting what they want. So definitely look on the 3-act story structure for this one, and then go backwards through your like character arc with the characters and the world building maybe. So then for another question, what are your favorite books? And I have to go to Goodreads here as well. Cinder by Marissa Meyer, the first book in the Lunar Chronicles. I love this series with my whole heart. It was the very first YA sci-fi series that I read that also had a very strong romantic subplot. And I also want to talk about Odin's Child by Siri Pettersson, because my love for Norse mythology wants these kind of books and I eat them up and they are everything. So Odin's Child is definitely one of my favorite books. And I also need to add Normal People to this list because it is very personal to me. I felt seen and represented with that book, and it just has a very special place in my heart, and it's one of my favorite books. And then you had another part to your question, which was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate Rings of Power? Honestly, I would give it a 7 out of 10. And this may come as a shock to you, and maybe you don't even know what Rings of Power is. So Rings of Power is the prequel series to Lord of the Rings, and the series is made by Amazon Prime, or Amazon. And I love Lord of the Rings. I have grown up watching the movies and we have like a marathon each year. There's just so much nostalgia and love and just heartwarming memories that I have connected to this world and Tolkien's works and everything like that. I haven't read the books yet, but I have bought the first one, so I am going to read it. So that's a little bit of backstory of my love for Lord of the Rings. When I started watching Rings of Power, I didn't expect anything grand. I just expected for me to like look at the scenes and hear the people talk and just be reminded of why I love, or what I did love about Lord of the Rings. So I loved the Rings of Power for that nostalgia, and I could watch the series and like I could see the elves and I could see the dwarves, and like it was the Tolkien that I remember from my childhood and from the Lord of the Rings movies. And I actually did really enjoy Galadriel's and whole storyline in the book. I felt like the last episode was very good. Like I didn't have any complaints on it, and I feel like this one did something that, for example, Obi-Wan, the Disney original series of Obi-Wan, I feel like the prequel to Lord of the Rings series did something that Obi-Wan, which is a prequel to Star Wars, could not do, and that was build anticipation and build angst and tension in the episodes, because I didn't really feel like Obi-Wan was able to do that. Even though they brought up a lot of high stakes with a certain character in that, I'm not going to spoil it, but they brought up the stakes with a certain character in that one that we want to protect. But it didn't really stick the landing in my opinion, because the last ending scenes in that series just fell flat, and the whole thing that the Obi-Wan series was building up to, I was so disappointed in the ending scene between Obi-Wan and a certain character. Anyway, going back to the prequel of Lord of the Rings, I feel like because of the whole secrecy and not knowing which character was which, because of things that they kept hidden from us throughout the episodes, that built a lot of tension, and I feel like the last episode delivered on that tension. And that's why I give it 7 out of 10 stars. And I'm sorry if you didn't watch Rings of Powers and you had to sit through me talk about the series. So let's go to the next question. What inspired you to start writing? So since I have written for my whole life, I don't really have a point in time when I was inspired to start writing, because I have done it my whole life. But what inspired me to start writing seriously, and me wanting to write a whole book instead of just short stories or a first couple of pages of a book? And I think there's a certain person actually that inspired me to do this, and that is Abby Emmons here on YouTube. So I found her channel and I found her outlining videos, and it is because of those outlining videos and those methods that she talked about that I was able to finish a whole story, and I was inspired enough to start writing whole books instead of just a half of a book or a couple of chapters or a novella or something like that. And also something that inspired me to start writing seriously is probably COVID and the pandemic, because I wrote my debut novel the second year of high school, and that was during the pandemic, or in the beginning of the pandemic. So I had a lot of time and we were working at home. So I guess Abby Emmons and the pandemic is my best answer, but I found Abby Emmons before the pandemic. So I have 4 questions left, and I'm gonna answer them rather quickly because they have short answers. Another question is, how many book projects are you working on at the moment? I'm not working on anything right now. Projects that I have up and running that I have not finished, of course, my debut novel. So that's one. And then I read through Project Full Moon very recently, so I can easily just go back to that and start editing on the computer. And then I have the first draft of the sequel to Gods of the Ruin that I finished writing this summer. So I have 3 book projects up and running that I have started but not finished. So that's the answer. And then there's another question. What's your next project? After Gods of Rotten Ruin, I'm probably gonna go back to book 2, the sequel that is. In a month or 2, I could go back to it and work on it again. So I think that's the plan. And then 2 questions that I have gotten recently on my YouTube channel that I just wanted to bring up here if you haven't heard my answer for them. And that is, when is Project Full Moon going to be published? So Project Full Moon is an NaNoWriMo book that I wrote last year. The thing is, I don't know when this is gonna be published. My plan is to send it to publishers, but since I have a a whole series going on, I'm gonna focus on the series first, and then I can see what I'm gonna do with Project Full Moon. And then the last question, I'm gonna end it on a sad note, which is not great, but that is your book gonna be published in English? And the answer is no. Not right now. If I find or get the opportunity to translate myself or hire someone to translate it later on, I will do that because I want to share this story with you because you have been with me so long. Best case scenario is that later down the line, when I find someone to translate it, I will do that, and hopefully someone like a US or UK publisher would want to publish it, or I publish it myself. But that is going to be the end of this Q&A, Ask Me Anything. I hope that you enjoyed watching it, and if you have any questions, like I said, leave them in the comments below and I will answer them or save them for a later vlog or a later Q&A. But thank you so much for watching this video. Leave a like and a comment below and subscribe because I post a new video every week, every Thursday, and I'll see you in the next one.